thank you all. It's very good to be here to be able to insult you publicly about food and the future of food. My name is Johan Jorgensen. I come from Sweden Foodtech. I come from Sweden, and I also come from Sweden Foodtech. And what is Sweden Foodtech? Well, let's start with that before we dive into the juicy parts of this talk. Well, move over France and Italy. We've said that already. But what we do at Sweden Foodtech, we accelerate innovation for the future of food. Now, what is the future of food? We're going to get into that later on, but we do give advice to large and small companies, sometimes even nations, cities such as Stockholm, regarding what the future of food is. Because it's not just about food anymore. We sit at something called the epicenter in Stockholm, which is the urban epicenter for innovation in Stockholm, where we also build this good food house, where we sit together with all these entrepreneurs, challenging the current paradigms within food. And we sit at that place because we think it's important to also engage and interact with the other sectors out there, especially in tech, which we have plenty of in the Nordics. Every non-COVID years, we host one of the world's largest food festivals in Stockholm called the Stockholm Smaka Good Food Festival. For obvious reasons, we haven't been able to pull that off for a couple of years now, which the usual 400,000 participants are pretty sad about. We hope to get it back up rolling again next year. And then you're all welcome, of course. You're also welcome, of course, to Sweden Foodtech Big Meet, which is the annual Foodtech conference up in the north, where some 700 people gather to talk about the next-gen food system every year. But then why do we do this? Well, it's not for the food culture. And this here is an actual headline from BBC, where it turned out that there was a fire in this factory where we produced fermented Baltic herring. And those of you who ever tasted that knows it's awful, it's vicious, it's vile, and it's cans of herring that's fermenting under a very long time, and then it tastes and smells like exactly what you would think, and you've exposed them to heat, they can explode. And that's what happened when this factory blew up. We had missiles of foul-smelling and tasting fish being spread all over the countryside around that factory. So that's our food culture. That's where we come from. And it's definitely not for the food production itself. So self-sufficiency in Sweden is about 50%. And you can note from this picture that it's sugar, potatoes, and grains that we mostly produce. You know what combines those or unites them? Well, you can turn them into alcohol. Of course, there we're self-sufficient by far. For the rest of the stuff, we're not. So it's definitely not for the production, even though we talk a lot about the great Swedish produce. And to be honest, it's not true, it's a lie. The produce isn't great, it's okay, and we don't have enough of it. It's definitely not for the food sector innovations. If you look at the Swedish food sector, it consists of basically nothing, because we sold all our food companies to the French, the Dutch, and the Brits over the course of a 50-year period. And right now we're down there in the far bottom of the innovation rooster when it comes to innovation in the food system, the traditional food system, that is. It is because the true value of food is not about food itself anymore, it's about the effects. And I think we're all starting to realize now that when we start to look beyond the plate at food, we will see new things. We put on the lens of food, so to say, to look on the world. And then you see new things, and then suddenly also new drivers of change emerge. And that means a transformation of the food sector as well. Because it's not immune to transformation. It believes it's immune to transformation because it's so large and so fundamental. But hey, transformation is coming to that sector too. Let's say this is a kind of a complicated graph, and when I teach people how to pitch, I usually say shy away from complicated graphs, but let me dive into it. This is from the Rockefeller Foundation, which is a huge American endowment, talking about the next-gen food system, which is one of the parts. It is a breakdown on what the American food sector costs beyond food itself. So in the US, roughly they spend $1 trillion on food every year. food in the home, food in restaurants. But that $1 trillion of food also gives rise to a couple of other things. For instance, a $1.1 trillion in healthcare costs and $1 trillion more in environmental degradation, which means that every food dollar really costs $3. And this is something that's starting to sink in now. So we think that food is cheap. In reality, it's super expensive. It's just that somebody else pays for it. Another wallet pays for the negative effects of food. And I think the world has gradually woken up to this fact now that has been well hidden, well guarded by the food sector itself. Because this is very, very hard to realize when you work with food that most people think is so fantastic and so great and brings a lot of good taste around. Truth is, food is killing the planet and everyone on it in its current form. And that needs to change if we are to remain on this planet as a species. Now, it's also important to realize that we're moving the entire population of planet Earth into cities. Over the next 30 years or so, we will double the amount of people living in cities across the planet. Now, this means that we will build these new cities, but that's a huge endeavor to double the amount of cities or urban areas on planet Earth over just a couple of decades. And that means, though, that we need to start to realize that man doesn't live in the countryside anymore. We have become urban dwellers. But what does the urban environment have for the production of food? Well, we do have a lot of CO2 in cities. Cities are the main producer of CO2 gases, which of course is a great input if you're going to make anything biological. Nutrients in the form of sewage, waste, etc. And currently we just throw them away. Sometimes we dump them on landfills. Sometimes we turn them into biogas, which is, well, it's not that bad, but it's definitely not as good as it could be. We have excess heat. That's also very good for producing plant food. And we have all the consumers. I think it's kind of interesting to think about that we still see food and cities as something that unites in the following way. We build cities by stacking stones on top of each other. And then we ship in massive amounts of food from the countryside. And then we ship out waste. Instead of building a true circular human habitat in urban environments going forward. And mind you, we must do that. In my city of Stockholm, you can quantify the number of side streams or the amount of side streams, something like billions of euros. In a city like Paris, of course, 10 times as much, like tens of billions of euros that we currently just throw away, that become really good inputs for producing food in the future. Not the food that you're used to, but definitely good nutrition and good food for the future. The interesting thing about cities is also that it's densely populated areas. And these are not just densely populated, they're also populated by individuals. And this is where tech and IT come in. We used to see urban population as a mass of people. You say, oh, there are millions of people, I can serve them. But now we see millions of individuals with their individual needs. And mind you, we just saw that $1 trillion, in costs for the US food system goes towards healthcare, which is basically individual and their data sets, because they don't know what to eat. They don't have a clue. They're eating what they're being fed in the urban environment. But hey, we're going towards a situation where all these people start to realize that I have something that is a unique biological setup. And that defines, combined with what I eat, how I exercise, if I'm going to live a healthy and good life or not. We all know about the obesity epidemics that we see around the world. We all know about the diabetes. We all know about the cardiovascular disease that we're currently being haunted by. This is a map of the biochemical pathways. And that means basically when a metabolite, something that you eat, gets into your body, how that changes over the multiple reactions through enzymes in your body become these biochemicals that really feed us. I mean, we all know that we're not being fed by the food that we eat. We're being fed by the chemicals, biochemicals that this food is broken down into by our bodies. So unless we start to understand our own unique biochemical pathways, we will never be able to understand how food can be beneficial to us. So food is data. And without data, there is no food in the future, because we won't be able to realize or understand how to use food. You know, what do we want to achieve with it? Do we want to achieve health, sustainability, more efficiencies? What is it that we want to achieve with food? And for that, we need data. And this means that data can start to fuel algorithms, the algorithms that will help us make sense of this data and make sense of food. And this means that we can start steer things like robots, putting together food for us. And to me, robots might be an abomination. If you mention robots to a French chef, they start to threaten you with their knives and kick you out of their kitchens. But let's be honest about this. If we are to achieve a healthy, sustainable, individual eating, not everyone can have a chef, a personalized chef. We need to start to rely more on robots that can fine-tune individual meals for us in the future. So I'm pretty sure that all those companies out there currently making robots for the car industry, they will be the producers of the chefs of tomorrow. Because those robots will be able to rely on algorithms and data that we're currently collecting from and around food. And we can also use data in order to start messing with people's brains. I don't know how many of you have tried to mess with people's brains when it comes to food, through digital means, I mean. We had this experiment a few years ago where we put tofu in the mouths of people. And then we asked them, well, okay, what are you eating right now? And they said, oh, it's cheese, chicken, it's fish. It was very hard for people to nail it. And that's because the taste sensations really aren't on your tongue, it's in your brain. And your brain is pretty easy to mess with. So you could basically serve people something and make them believe it's something entirely different. Is this an abomination too? Or is it the democratization of food, where suddenly everyone can have lobster tail and truffle risotto, though it's absolutely something else that you're shoving into your mouth? And I think that will be the case in the future. We will start to have other types of experiences in and around food through the help of means such as digital. Is this right or is it wrong? For many people in the food sector, this is utterly wrong. This is a horrible, horrible future. Is it right? Yeah, for many people it's right, especially for the next generation, and especially for people in my home country of Sweden. You French are blessed in the sense that you come from a situation where you have a great, fantastic food system, and a culture that's really appreciating good food. In Sweden, 70% of the population hates to cook, and they do it extremely badly. So these people are actually taking perfectly fine produce, going into the kitchen, immediately destroying it, to no nutritional value, and they have to throw away the waste because it was so disgusting. That's a really bad food system. So these people are craving help from someone who could fix the food for them. At the same time, we focus on other things. So the LOHAS is a concept that is rapidly growing around the world. It's called the lifestyle of health and sustainability. And that is the religious fundament for the new Church of Sweden, if you like. So that's what everyone is totally bothered about. That's the core, and that's the viewpoint from which we see food in Sweden. And when you look at the logic that you can derive from a nation such as Sweden or a Stockholm, city of Stockholm, you define it as a modern city filled with change-minded individuals. These people are not conservative when it comes to changing things. If there's a new trend, we jump, right? Almost anxiously. It's a super techy city. Programmer is the most common job description. Health and sustainability, of course, innovation is key. Public, policy making is kind of forward-looking, and it's not so tied into the current structures of the food sector. Mind you, I don't know how many politicians in Europe that are in the pockets of the food sector, but I can assure you there are plenty of them. We don't have that because we don't have a food sector. So that's why we think that Stockholm will become the most relevant hub for the development of the next-gen food system going forward. Because we're not alone. Because a lot of people have realized that the food sector is up for grabs, and it's the largest sector on planet Earth, and it doesn't defend itself well, especially not towards innovation. So consumer pressure, chefs in gastronomy, who are really forward-leaning as well, big finance has started to see that food is, hey, we can do something about food. It's easy to steal the candy from them. Technology and new business models for sure, really redefining food everywhere in the world. Science, come up with new ways to produce food all the time. Nutrition, policy, and of course new industry entrants, because food is not anymore only for the food companies. We spoke about cities. That means that food is also something to take into consideration for property developers, technical consultants, builders of infrastructure. And those are pretty large economies on their own. And combined with food, they're super large economies and will define planet Earth. So of course they want to be in on the action. And the old food value chain is going to be squashed by that. It's going to be something that doesn't have or retain its power anymore, because power over food will move to new layers. And I think, and which layers, I don't know yet, and which players, I don't know, but it's definitely moving away from the current ones. And let's say, now, sorry for being a bit technical here, but many of you recognize the innovation adoption curve and how innovations are being adopted in society. And usually it's always run by the early innovators, tiny little percentage, you know, the ones who got the first iPhone and then this, you know, first iPhone 2, etc., etc. They're followed by the early adopters, the early majority, and here we have the old people, the late majority, and the laggards, mostly old male, white males who want to eat their steaks and have their cars. And the problem for the current food system is that they have to adapt to the entire value chain, or they have adapted the entire value chain and the entire innovation curve, which means that they almost by definition end up here. They want to encompass or embrace the late majority and the laggards too, because that's a large part of the market. But what we're seeing now in food is that we don't have these big structural definitions anymore of food. It's leaning towards this area here, the innovators and the early adopters. And this is also what we find in the Nordics. It's a very early adoption country. And that means that if you think that the future belongs to innovation and that there is a change happening, that this is where it happens. And then the innovation curve shifts pretty fast towards this area here. What remains over here? Nothing. And that's why I think it's important to say that food sector is under a tremendous challenge and a tremendous stress from the new entrants. We talk about the 4 stages of food. Now, as food, there is one certain value that's on the plate. We can see that every day. We know what that is. But we also saw from the Rockefeller study that the environment is as large a market for food as food is, and that health is the same. And beyond, we have all the unknown unknowns. So what if we could use food in order to enhance our productivity levels? Say with 10%. Can you do that? Absolutely, researchers say. It's probably even higher. And when you talk about productivity levels that increase by 10%, you talk about global GDP increasing by 10%. That has a tremendous value. Can you use food in order to improve the results in schools? Absolutely, you can do that. Can you use food in order to improve integration? We will have massive integration issues going forward, mostly because people out there won't have food. They will move to places like Europe. We need to integrate them. Can we use food in order to do that properly? Absolutely. Health? Absolutely. We cannot cure all the diseases that the food system is currently costing us in the healthcare industry. So we need to eat better. Urban developers talked about that. We've spoken about urban side streams. Happiness, of course, food is happiness. It's joy. We should never forget that. Because unless we can provide happiness and joy to people, they will never change. And here I think it's important to look at innovation, because innovation can actually bring more joy and happiness to us than we're currently experiencing through food. And I think the VR glasses and this immensely stacked burger I showed you in a couple of pictures ago is one of the examples of that. And what we're trying to do in the city of Stockholm, why I think this will be a future food hub, is that we've started to have this strategic insight that food is no longer about food, it's all the effects of food. And once you see that, and that business is larger than the current food sector, then you get an aha moment. And we start moving towards it. So we devised now a program that we call By 40 Stockholm. And by 2040 that is, of course, we shall have a new food system that outpaces the old food system. That is the new food is stronger than the old foods. It's driving food for us in Stockholm. Already by 2030, we've said to ourselves, then we should see the outlines of this project so people can onboard massively towards it. So this is the journey we're trying to embrace. And that's also why I think, and many with me, that places such as Stockholm do have a chance to become one of the leading food spots in the world going forward. Now, it won't be the same type of food as you have here in France or in Italy or in other great food cultures, but it will be all the rest of the stuff around food that we'll try to take charge of. But that's our hope for the future. And I hope, of course, that France would like to battle it out with us, and so we jointly can compete to achieve a food system that is good for everyone and the planet as soon as possible. Thank you so much.